Greetings. Today we delve into a daring World War II mission that could have changed the course of history. It's a story of courage, resilience, and the relentless fight in the skies over North Africa, where a battered bomber with a legendary name took to the air, carrying the hopes of a nation. But what if the aircraft's crew faced more than just enemy fighters? Could the very men flying that plane have secrets that threatened to unravel everything? Was the All-American Three truly as invincible as it seemed? Or was there something hidden beneath her polished exterior? How did a former football star from Savannah, once celebrated for undefeated seasons, transform into a man whose nerves of steel would be tested against impossible odds? Did the bomber's history of flawless service conceal a dangerous flaw? And what role did last-minute replacements and unpredictable equipment failures play in shaping the outcome of this critical mission? All these pieces, an elite crew, a legendary aircraft, a pivotal target, are part of a complex puzzle. The central question is, what secrets, risks, and surprises awaited those brave men in the cockpit on that fateful day? In this video, we will trace their journey step by step, separating myth from reality, unveiling truths that could shock you. We're about to unravel the full story behind this historic flight, exposing the hidden dangers and extraordinary heroism that defined it. And now, the most gripping part begins. Let's dive into the first chapter of this incredible saga. Authority of a seasoned leader, his gaze sharp and focused as he methodically checked each lever, dial, and lever on the aircraft. The sun had just begun to lift from the horizon, casting a subdued glow over the Algerian sands, and the air was tinged with the scent of oily mechanics and the promise of a long mission ahead. Inside the cramped cockpit, Bragg's crew was busy finalizing their preparations, each man knowing that today's flight could turn into a story for the ages. The process was precise. Every bolt, every gauge, and every instrument was checked and double-checked with practiced efficiency that spoke to countless previous missions. Their plane, the famous All-American Three, gleamed faintly in the early morning light, a symbol of American resilience and technological prowess. As they taxied toward the runway, the men aboard felt a mixture of anticipation and resolve, fully aware that their journey could end in disaster or glory, depending on what awaited them high above the desert beneath the endless blue sky. The quiet tension was broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional command from the ground crew moving swiftly around them. With a practiced roar, the engines roared to life, shaking the aircraft's sturdy frame as they prepared for takeoff. Bragg's hands instinctively tightened on the controls. His mind focused on the task ahead, unwavering in his conviction that their aircraft, despite its battered appearance after years of service, was ready for the challenge. Moments later, the bomber lifted smoothly into the air, leaving behind the shimmering sands of Biskra, Algerian airstrip, ascending into the vast expanse where the war in the skies was about to unfold in its most tense and perilous form. The sky ahead was already dotted with the distant shadows of enemy fighters, but for now the crew of the All-American Three was on a trajectory toward their target, unaware of the incredible sequence of events that would soon see them surviving against all odds. A near miraculous feat that would be etched into the annals of aviation history for generations to come. The intrinsic hope and unyielding spirit of the men aboard that plane carried them into the unknown. Driven by skill, courage, and a relentless desire to complete their mission, no matter how daunting the obstacles might be. The shores of North Africa was vital for sustaining the Axis armies entrenched there, and thus striking those harbor facilities was a decisive strike aimed at crippling the enemy's logistical network. This mission was not only a testament to daring, but also a reflection of the resilience and unwavering confidence of the men who flew through dangerous skies, each of them carrying the weight of hope for their country and the fate of the continent. Lieutenant Bragg, who had once demonstrated unparalleled prowess on football fields back home in Savannah, now exuded a quiet assurance born from a revolutionary blend of physical dominance and mental resilience. The newspapers from that hometown still murmured about his stellar performance with the storied Duke's 1938 Iron Dukes, a team renowned for their unparalleled strength and tenacity during the football season. During that era, his team had finished undefeated and unscored upon throughout the entire regular season, earning a reputation as an inseparable unit that simply could not be beaten. This tenacity, This relentless refusal to bow to defeat, even when faced with overwhelming odds, had woven itself into Bragg's very fabric, and even more notably, had become the cornerstone of his character as he transitioned from the gridiron to silver wings. Now, as he sat within the cockpit of Boeing's magnificent B-17F-5BO aircraft, serial number 4,124,406, he knew that same iron will served him well in the skies, where victory was often determined by nerves of steel as much as by skill. This particular aircraft, affectionately named All-American 3 by her crew, bore the hopes of a nation on her metallic frame. Built at Boeing's prolific facilities in Seattle, she was a marvel of engineering, meticulously crafted to withstand the rigors of sustained combat. Since August 24th of the year 1942, she had been Bragg's pride and trusted companion in the skies. Her history was etched not only in her sturdy fuselage, but also in the countless miles she had flown across the Atlantic as part of Operation Bolero, the sweeping Allied effort to bolster the European theater through an expansive aerial campaign. Pilots and ground crews alike had ensured she was prepared for every conceivable challenge, painting her name boldly across the nose, a symbol of hope and resilience. The aircraft was in pristine condition, running as smoothly as silk, unwrinkled and unbroken, evidence of the dedicated maintenance and careful attention she received. Bragg's crew regarded her as not just a machine, but a vital extension of themselves, one they trusted implicitly. From the cockpit, Lieutenant Technical Sergeant Joe C. James communicated a reassuring report from his position at the flight engineers panel. Joe, who would also be manning the top turret once they approached enemy territory, possessed a mechanical intuition, an innate sense that separated skilled engineers from the truly great. When James said that her systems were fully operational, the crew's confidence was reinforced. She was ready. Throughout that morning, the crew assembled, an eclectic blend of individuals whose paths had converged through the unifying force of shared purpose and rigorous training. Men from vastly different walks of life had come together. Alexander from a banking family in Connecticut, or Harry from his university studies in Minnesota, forming a peculiar sisterhood and brotherhood forged in the crucible of war. The co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Godfrey Engel, Jr., brought with him a background steeped in the regulative stability of the financial sector, symbolizing the continuity and order that they hoped to uphold. Meanwhile, Harry Nussel's decision to abandon his engineering studies at the University of Minnesota to enlist reflected a profound sense of duty. Ralph Burbridge, the seasoned bombardier at just 23, had already earned his wings before Pearl Harbor, making him one of the most seasoned members even among this experienced crew. The enlisted personnel contributed their specialized skills as well. Staff Sergeant Paul A. Galloway, whose mastery over the complex and often temperamental liaison radios had become invaluable, stood ready to handle communications that were crucial during combat operations. The waist gunners, Staff Sergeant Michael Zuck and Sergeant Elton Condor, meticulously checked their Browning machine guns, 50 caliber weapons that represented yet another layer of the aircraft's formidable defense system. Condor, however, was a last-minute substitute, stepping into his role at the 11th hour due to an ill crew member from the 341st Squadron, a reminder of the unpredictable nature of war. Together, they examined and tested each weapon until they were confident in her readiness, leaving nothing to chance. Settling into his position was Staff Sergeant Sam T. Serapoulos, who earned himself the nickname Lonesome Sam through reasons that would later reveal a hauntingly tragic dimension. As he prepared, he displayed the stoicism of a man who understood, in the depths of his soul, that he was perhaps the bomber's most vulnerable defender. These men, often from starkly different backgrounds, embodied the democratic spirit of the American war effort, each contributing their expertise toward these strategically significant ports in North Africa, had been instrumental in strengthening the Axis powers' defenses and were critical targets for the Allied forces conducting their bombing campaigns. Each successful raid not only inflicted tangible damage, but also edged the Allies closer to breaking through the airspace and land defenses that veiled the continent. Such victories steadily paved the way for a potential breakthrough into southern Europe, opening new avenues for Allied advance and influence. On this particular day, the formation of bombers assembled gracefully over the vast expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, executing their complex maneuver with the fluidity and precision characteristic of a meticulously choreographed aerial ballet. Among them, 12 Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress biplanes of the 414th Bombardment Squadron formed their tight defensive box pattern, a sophisticated three-dimensional arrangement painstakingly designed to maximize their overlapping fields of fire, especially from the 50 caliber machine guns mounted along their wings and fuselage. This formation protection allowed them to cover and defend each other against enemy fighters, significantly improving their survivability during these perilous missions. All aircraft of the American squadron had their designated positions, and in this scenario, All-American 3 took her rightful place on the right wing of the lead aircraft, which was named Flaming, a name that struck a note of fiery determination. The squadron's commanding officer, Major Robert Coulter, who also served as their operations officer, personally oversaw the formation's integrity and tactical readiness. However, an ominous cloud hung over the operation. The expected fighter escort that could have offered an additional layer of protection was unavailable, grounded by mechanical failures preventing the P-38 Lightning fighters from taking to the skies. This absence cast a heavy shadow of concern over the formation, forcing these brave crews to rely solely on their own guns and the time-tested but unproven in actual combat principle of mutual defense. At the altitude of 20,000 feet, the environment turned brutally harsh. Temperatures plummeted to a staggering -40 degrees Fahrenheit, a stark reminder of the deadly Arctic conditions that fighters and bombers alike faced at such heights. Ice rapidly formed on the aircraft's numerous windows, hampering visibility and posing danger to the crew. Inside their oxygen masks, the crew members' breath often froze, requiring continuous effort to melt the stubborn ice crystals that threatened to clog their air supplies and compromise their breathing, essential for both alertness and survival in this frozen inferno. Their flight suits, an innovative marvel of American engineering, offered some protection through electrically heated fabric that attempted to combat the relentless cold. Yet even these advanced suits struggled against the ferocity of the cold, especially at high altitude, where frostbite and hypothermia became common hazards among crews after prolonged missions. Many men returned from sorties bearing frostbite injuries that could rival their battlefield wounds in severity, a testament to the brutal conditions they endured. Beyond the cockpit, the objective came into view. The target, the port city of Tunis, emerged through the scattered clouds beneath the aircraft. Bombardier Ralph Burbridge, poised in the nose of the lead plane with his Norden bomb sight, an exceptionally protected and secret device, announced confidently over the intercom that they had the target in sight. The port becked with a frenetic activity. Ships swarmed with activity, unloading supplies as trains waited on sidings to transport munitions and provisions, while trucks streamed relentlessly toward the front, where the last stand was being mounted by the Afrika Korps against the advancing forces of Montgomery's 8th Army and Patton's 2nd Corps. The precision of this bombing run was critical. For exactly 3 minutes, the formation had to maintain a steady, level flight path with no evasive maneuvers to ensure that their bombs would hit their designated mark. During this time, Burbridge worked tirelessly, synchronizing his Norden sight with the target below to achieve pinpoint accuracy. The Norden device was the subject of utmost secrecy, regarded so carefully that it was removed from the aircraft after each mission. Its complex system of gyroscopes and mechanical calculations allowed for exact determination of the bomb release point, a crucial factor in the success of the raid. Suddenly, a warning filtered through the aircraft. There's flak coming up, perhaps alarmingly unnecessary, given the evident black puffs blossoming around them in the sky. These puffs represented shrapnel from the barrage of anti-aircraft artillery, deadly and relentless. The Germans' 88mm guns, originally designed as formidable anti-tank weapons, had proven devastatingly effective against the bomber formations, disrupting their mission and threatening their lives. These shells were fused to detonate at carefully calculated altitudes, a deadly practice intended to create a lethal box of death, forcing the bombers to fly through a deadly hailstorm of explosive metal. As Burbridge called out, "Bombs away," the bomber lurched upward as 4,000 pounds of high explosives were released from her bomb bay in a precise, coordinated push. In the sky below, the port area. As the evening haze descended over the battlefield, an ominous threat loomed close, forcing the opposing fighters into action. A pair of formidable German Messerschmitt Bf-109 G4 fighters appeared suddenly on the scene, slicing through the sky with calculated precision. Their menacing presence looked reminiscent of the iconic 109s, soaring roughly 2,000 feet above their targets. The warning sirens blared in unison from multiple gunners stationed around the bomber formation, signaling imminent danger as these sleek fighters descended swiftly, diving out from their sunny vantage point to strike. The German pilots, well acquainted with the nuances of aerial combat, had learned through bitter experience that the B-17's defensive armament was particularly vulnerable from the front. The aircraft's nose guns struggled to depress enough to target fighters approaching from below, while the top turret lacked the agility to follow a fast-moving enemy edging in from overhead. This knowledge made their attack run even more calculated and dangerous. The first of the attacking fighters, piloted by Eloit Julius Mimmerberg of the 11th JG-2 Squadron, a unit temporarily attached to the Jägerschade 53 bomber group and recognized as an ace of spades within German ranks, locked onto the American target at approximately 500 yards. As Mimber opened fire, his twin 20mm cannons and 13mm machine guns flashed brightly from his wings, spewing a torrent of deadly rounds towards the bomber below. The fierce barrage struck the lead B-17, causing the aircraft to shudder violently under the impact. Bits of aluminum sheeting peeled away from the fuselage like confetti, a stark testament to the destructive power unleashed during this deadly encounter. Meanwhile, a second German fighter, flown by Feldwebel Erich Patzia of the 6th/JG-53 Squadron, joined the assault with deadly intent, locking onto the formation's vulnerable 3 American aircraft. Patzia, a relatively novice pilot despite his impressive record of 16 confirmed aerial victories, had already shown himself to be a skilled combatant. His victory tally had earned him the coveted Ehrenpokal der Luftwaffe, a goblet of honor symbolizing his success as a fighter pilot. Confident and precise, Piazza knew exactly where to aim, targeting the cockpit to eliminate the pilots directly responsible for its control, aiming the engines to disable the bomber's propulsion, and directing fire toward the wing routes, where vital fuel tanks lurked, hoping to bring down the massive aircraft quickly. However, despite his training and experience, something went horribly wrong during this crucial moment. Approaching within 300 yards, Piazza initiated his escape maneuver, a tactical half-roll designed to take him underneath the bomber, away from its strongest defensive fire. This was a maneuver he had practiced dozens of times before, yet on this occasion, it failed to execute properly. Whether due to overconfidence, distraction by the unfolding chaos, fatigue, or perhaps mechanical failure of his aircraft, anything could have gone awry. Perhaps, and herein lies a crucial element of history's messy detail, Piazza might not have initiated the maneuver at all because fate had already claimed him. Ralph Burbridge, an eyewitness and later a witness to the scene, would later recall having Piazza in his sights, his airplane closing in. "He was coming straight at us," Ralph would say, "and I could see his face through the windscreen." The moment was fleeting but intensely vivid. Then suddenly the top turret on the bomber opened fire. At that same instant, James, a technical sergeant manning the twin 50 caliber machine guns in the top turret, unleashed a well-placed burst directly into the cockpit of the German fighter. The shot struck home with deadly precision. At least one round, possibly more, found its mark in Piazza's cockpit, bringing an immediate halt to his engagement. Whether this inflicted instant death or rendered him merely incapacitated, the effect on his aircraft was identical. The fighter, now uncontrollable, became a lethal projectile of chaos. This 2,000-pound aircraft, designed for precision and speed, lost all recognizable control at over 350 miles per hour, spinning rapidly into the chaos of the formation around it. What unfolded in the next moments was brief but harrowing, lasting less than 2 seconds. Yet it would be analyzed and debated by aviation historians and military analysts for decades to come. The uncontrollable Bf-109, driven solely by the destructive forces acting upon it, sliced through the formation in its final, tragic roll. Its left wing especially became a deadly blade, shearing through the fuselage of the nearby American aircraft as if it were a sharp sword slicing through paper. The destructive path of the German fighter was devastating. Its wing clipped into the side of the bomber just aft of the waist gun positions, creating a deep diagonal gash across the fuselage. The wing sheared through the aircraft, severing the horizontal stabilizer and tearing the vertical stabilizer from its mounting. The damage was, the scene of the impact was nothing short of extraordinary, challenging the very boundaries of comprehension and leaving onlookers in awe. The game of physics that unfolded during this fierce collision seemed almost impossible to grasp. Imagine a Bf-109 fighter plane streaking through the sky at a staggering relative velocity of nearly 400 miles per hour, cutting through the air with lethal precision. One would naturally assume that such a swift and forceful impact would tear the massive B-7 aircraft into two pieces, almost certainly splitting it in half along its midsection. Yet, against all odds and natural expectation, an astonishing event occurred. By what many of the crew members would later describe as divine intervention, perhaps divine, perhaps pure chance, the German fighter's wing narrowly missed striking the main structural spars on the right side of the fuselage by mere inches. This tiny margin was all that separated total destruction from a kind of miraculous survival. The result was that the tail section, which happened to contain Staff Sergeant Sam Sorilis, remained physically attached to the fuselage by what investigators would later define as the absolute minimal structural connection required. Not enough for normal control, but sufficient to prevent complete disintegration. The German aircraft, as a consequence of such a catastrophic collision, disintegrated into chaos. Its wing, torn violently from its fuselage, remained partially embedded, jutting from the side of the B-7 in a jagged and tragic wreck. Simultaneously, the impact inflicted irreversible damage, sparking a ball of flames, its engine and the forward fuselage tumbling away in a blazing explosion that lit the desert air with an unearthly glow. Meanwhile, pieces of the German fighter, including the tail section adorned with its unmistakable yellow nose and black crosses, symbols of the enemy, rotated helplessly through the air like a maple seed caught in the wind, descending in slow, unpredictable spirals towards the desert below. Inside that blazing wreckage was Feldwebel Erich Patzia, born on the 7th of May in the year 1918 in Germany, who would later be posthumously awarded a commendation on the 1st of March, 1943. Unaware of the incredible story of resilience and survival his death had forged, Erich Patzia's sacrifice was a part of one of aviation's most remarkable tales of endurance and luck. Meanwhile, the crew of their American B-17, designated number 3, had little time to dwell on the fate of their attacker. They faced their own dire circumstances, a crisis presenting problems that, by the laws of physics and aerodynamics, should have been insurmountable challenges. Steeling themselves amid chaos, the pilot addressed his crew through the intercom, trying to maintain composure. "Check in, everyone. Are you okay?" Bragg's steady tone cut through the tension, belying the physical strain he must have felt, wrestling with controls that had suddenly become mushy, unresponsive, as if the aircraft itself had gone motionless in the storm. The damage was severe. The control cables connected to the tail's elevator and rudder, those vital surfaces responsible for changing the pitch and direction of the aircraft, had been either severed or badly damaged, rendering the crew unable to command the plane's movements effectively. The aircraft was refusing to behave as intended. It wanted to nose down, spiraling uncontrollably into what pilots often termed the graveyard spiral, a perilous descent that would lead to catastrophic failure if left unchecked. One by one, the crew members forcefully responded to Bragg's call. Miraculously, despite the brutality of the impact, none of them had suffered injuries from the collision itself. Yet the pressing concern was the tail gunner, Sam Sorilis. As Bragg anxiously awaited his reply, silence stretched across the intercom. There was no response. "Sam, are you okay back there?" The pilot repeated, voice tense yet steady. Still no answer. It was then that the crew realized the interphone line to the tail section had been cut. Their worry heightened until, through the jagged hole in the fuselage, they glimpsed movement, a faint sign of life in the chaos. Sam Ceralis was alive, caught in the tail section, which had been torn from the airplane, but remained partially attached. The tail was swaying independently in the turbulent slipstream, eerily like a kite caught on a string in a hurricane, an image vividly remembered by one crew member, a haunting symbol of both fragility and resilience. The extent of the damage was staggering. It was almost incomprehensible. The left horizontal stabilizer, a key component that controlled the aircraft's stability along the pitch axis, was completely gone, shorn off by the formidable wing of the German fighter. The elevator, which connected to the stabilizer and provided critical control over the plane's ascent and descent, was absent on that side. The vertical stabilizer, the large upright tail surface responsible for steering and directional control, bore a crippling gash amidst some of the most iconic imagery associated with the war. One particular photograph captures the harrowing condition of what was once a proud warbird. In that image, the tail section of the aircraft, known as All-American 3, is strikingly misaligned, visibly offset from its normal position, canting at a steep angle that clearly indicates an imminent structural failure. The damage is unambiguous, a jagged diagonal slash running through the fuselage, exposing the raw, torn metal beneath, and the absence of the stabilizer, which should have been a vital component for maintaining flight stability. Despite such catastrophic damage, the aircraft astonishingly remains in level flight, a fact that defies the basic principles of physics and engineering, as anyone familiar with aerodynamics would recognize. It's almost as if the aircraft itself is defying natural law. The very notion seems incredible. Yet in the chaos of airborne combat, someone's voice over the intercom, filled with shock, anxiety, and perhaps a flicker of hope, seemed to acknowledge this impossible balancing act. The situation at the tail end of the aircraft was catastrophic. It was on the brink of coming apart entirely. The rear fuselage was flapping and waving with every gust, threatening to disintegrate. Inside the cockpit, co-pilot Captain Godfrey Engel Jr. was frantic, working desperately with pilot Major Bragg, their hands quickly adjusting what control inputs they could muster, trying to keep the aircraft from collapsing in midair. The damage to the traditional control surfaces, the rudder, elevators, and ailerons, rendered their usual methods of steering useless. Faced with this dire circumstance, they had to think outside the box, innovating under extreme pressure. Their aircraft's autopilot system, linked directly to the Norden bomb site, employed electromechanical servos instead of conventional mechanical cables. Recognizing an opportunity, they activated the autopilot in a limited capacity, enough to provide some semblance of stability amid the chaos swirling around them. One tactic they employed was the controlled modulation of engine power. By gradually increasing the thrust of the engines on the left side compared to those on the right, they could influence the aircraft's yaw, its rotation about the vertical axis, to counteract the vulnerability caused by the damage. Every adjustment, however, had to be meticulous and measured. Too much force at any one moment could put the compromised tail section under enough stress to finally tear loose, transforming the airplane into a crumpled wreck in mid-flight. Throughout the ordeal, the radio crackled to life with urgent messages. Major Coulter's voice, strained yet steady, reached the crew. His voice projected over the radio from the burning remains of the aircraft, designated MI, which had suffered severe damage in the attack by enemy fighters. Amid the chaos, Coulter's inquiry was blunt and desperate. "Can you make it home?" It was a moment of shared tension, hope, and uncertainty, as everyone aboard knew how fragile their metal lifeboat truly was. Bragg, glancing downward at the gauges, took stock of their dwindling reserves. His eyes scanned the fuel indicators. No significant leaks apparent, and tanks still read a sufficient reserve of fuel for their remaining journey. The engines, it seemed, continued to hum without issue, all temperatures and pressures within normal ranges. Electrical systems still functioning against all odds. The only visible damage was the missing chunk of fuselage, an 8 or 10-foot section ripped away that left a gaping hole exposing the internal framework. But in the grand scheme of their dire predicament, such a structural loss was a minor detail. Determined, Bragg responded with quiet resolve. "We're going to try," he said simply, knowing full well the risks involved. Meanwhile, inside the damaged tail section, Staff Sergeant Sam T. Cerilis faced an almost inconceivable choice. The tail, now half severed and swinging free, was moving erratically, swinging independently like a detached limb, sometimes shifting in a direction that threatened to throw him clear off balance. The remaining connections that still held the tail to the main fuselage were precarious, strained almost beyond the breaking point. Any sudden maneuver, any turbulence strong enough to jostle the aircraft, might cause the tail to finally rip away completely. Most men in Cerilis's position would have been paralyzed by fear, unable to decide whether to stay in place, hoping the broken tail would hold until landing or risk the perilous journey forward into the airplane's main body. But Cerilis made his choice. He grabbed his chest parachute along with his equipment, and in a move that would be remembered in wartime legend, he snatched a borrowed jacket belonging to Lieutenant Bragg, an act of improvisation and bravery that would resonate as one of the greatest displays of guts in the chaos. With just 30 feet of the damaged fuselage remaining between him and the main aircraft, Cerilis set off on what would become one of the most dangerous, nerve-wracking 10-meter traverses. Later on, he would undoubtedly recall the tense moments with clarity and quiet resilience. Throughout the entire ordeal, he maintained a calm demeanor, steady as possible, while dragging his gear behind him. When he finally reached our position, the very first thing he did was reach out and hand me the jacket of the crew's lieutenant, saying softly but earnestly, "Make sure the skipper gets this back. He might need it when we land." What should have been a quick, effortless journey had stretched on for nearly 10 minutes. Yet against all odds, Sam Saris had managed to arrive safely. Every member of our 10-man crew now occupied the forward section of the aircraft, ready to abandon ship without hesitation should the situation demand an emergency bailout. The formation of bombers confronting us found themselves faced with an excruciating decision. According to the standard procedures plotted out for such circumstances, aircraft that suffered irreparable damage and could no longer match the speed of the group were typically left behind. Such a move was believed to risk the integrity of the entire formation, forcing it to decelerate and thus exposing it more vulnerable to enemy fighter attacks. Yet despite these protocols, the brave crews of the 414th Squadron refused to abandon the American III, our core aircraft in this perilous situation. Instead, they closed ranks around the wounded bomber, forming a protective shield through their combined firepower, their guns blazing in a unified effort to fend off the attacking fighters. This self-imposed act of loyalty meant accepting greater danger for themselves, flying at slower speeds, maintaining formation longer than they might have desired, and lingering in enemy-held airspace for precious extra minutes. These men had shared a common bond forged in training, in the harsh and unyielding conditions of North African bases, where survival often depended on camaraderie and mutual support. They had endured loss together, friends lost in countless sorties, so their allegiance was rooted deep in shared hardship and trust. To them, the abstract notions of protocol or risk were secondary to loyalty and brotherhood. Over the radio, their formation commander, calling himself Red Leader, made a clear declaration. "We're staying with you until you're clear of fighter range. Keep her steady." His voice carried resolve and firm authority. Seeing this unwavering stance, the German fighters, perhaps low on fuel and ammunition, or recognizing their futile attempts, eventually turned away, defeated, or so it appeared. While they believed themselves victorious, the truth was more complex. Julius Mienberg, the wingman of Erich Paxia, would survive that day despite suffering severe burns from a fire ignited by defensive anti-aircraft fire, which had compromised his oxygen system. In his post-war memoir titled Fine Burong, Contact with the Enemy, Mienberg would later claim a B-17 kill as a result of this engagement. He was, in a manner of speaking, both partially correct and incorrect. For amidst this chaos, Flaming May, the severely damaged bomber, did indeed succumb to enemy fire. Major Coulter and 6 other crew members, innocent and courageous, were killed in that attack. Still, all hope was not lost for the remaining American III. Despite their aircraft's critical condition and the risk of catastrophic failure, they resolved to push on and refused to give in to despair. As dawn broke and the formation finally inched into Allied-controlled airspace, the other bombers began to peel away gradually, their wings waggling in a gesture of silent salute as they headed toward the airfield at Biskra. The American three, flying at a deliberately reduced speed to alleviate the stress on their battered aircraft, made the difficult choice to complete the journey alone. Their route from the target zone to Biskra's airfield was estimated to take about 1 hour. However, for the crew of that lone damaged bomber, the trip stretched out agonizingly to 90 minutes, what felt like an eternity. Every sudden air pocket, every surge of turbulence, sent a shudder through the aircraft, causing the crew members to instinctively clutch their seats and hold their breath, bracing for what might come next. Meanwhile, the tail section of the aircraft responded independently, its movements sometimes aligning with the fuselage, at other times twisting at angles that defied explanation. Bragg and Engel, the crew members responsible for preserving the aircraft's stability, found themselves engaged in a delicate, almost dance-like rhythm with their wounded plane. They made gentle, calculated adjustments, slight pressure on the yoke, never rapid or forceful, carefully perceiving the aircraft's responses through their hands and feet, their senses attuned to its limits. Throttles were fine-tuned incrementally, feeling the aircraft's subtle signals, adapting constantly, flying more by instinct than by precise instrumentation. Their responsibility was to modulate the aircraft's movements with the utmost care, to keep it airborne just long enough to reach safety. Flight engineer Joe James monitored this grueling process, his every action a testament to perseverance and skill amid dire circumstances. The crew busily attended to their engine checks and preparations with obsessive precision. Among them, engine number 3 was showing signs of overheating, likely caused by debris damage encountered during the previous encounter, or possibly from debris stirred up in flight. However, this temperature remained within limits considered safe for the aircraft's operation, and no immediate action was deemed necessary. All 4 engines' oil pressures were remarkably steady, a sign that the mechanical integrity of the power plants remained intact despite the damage sustained. Interestingly, their fuel consumption had actually improved, partly because the crew had reduced their speed to conserve fuel in anticipation of their pending arrival. Meanwhile, the Wright Cyclone radial engines, manufactured across different factories scattered throughout America by a dedicated workforce whose collective craftsmanship contributed to these engines' reliability, continued their steady, thunderous rhythm. These radial engines, built with meticulous precision by skilled workers who might never have known the purpose their work served, kept their powerful beat as if unaware of the battlefield events unfolding miles below. Bragg, the aircraft's navigator, broke the silence with a straightforward query. "Navigator, how far to base?" For a moment, Harry Newell, the navigator, had been silently immersed in his calculations, repeatedly recalibrating the aircraft's position in a meticulous effort to determine their exact location. The ongoing damage had affected the aircraft's trim, an issue experienced by pilots termed as flying the plane in a crab, where the nose points slightly to one side, causing the aircraft to drift sideways rather than fly straight. This drift impacted both their speed and fuel efficiency, making their journey more challenging than it might first have appeared. Despite the deviation, Harry's comprehensive calculations indicated they would reach their base, though only with minimal fuel reserves remaining. Roughly about 40 minutes of flight time left before fuel ran out entirely. Fortunately, the weather at their destination remained clear, providing a welcome environment for a possible landing, with no anticipated thunderstorms or other adverse conditions to obstruct their approach. Meanwhile, the radio operator, Paul Galloway, maintained a continuous and steady stream of communication with Biskra Tower, providing valuable updates on the aircraft's status, the extent of the damage, and their estimated time of arrival. With every piece of information, the base at Biskra responded with swift coordination. They had mobilized their entire emergency services fleet, which included ambulances standing ready to evacuate if needed, fire trucks on standby for rapid intervention, and crash crews poised to meet the aircraft upon landing. The base's commanding officer personally arrived at the control tower, standing shoulder to shoulder with the personnel on duty, physically present to keep a close watch on the unfolding situation and ensure maximum preparedness. The crew members were now meticulously executing their final landing preparations, approaching this critical moment surface with mechanical discipline honed by countless drills. Each crew member was engaged in methodically inspecting and rechecking their equipment, their hands moving with practiced synchronization, born of experience. Throughout these preparations, they kept their parachutes securely with them, knowing that if the tail of the aircraft separated during the descent, a real and present danger, they might only have seconds to evacuate through the plane's emergency exits. Zook and Kondrad, the waist gunners, took extra care to secure any loose equipment that could become dangerous projectiles in the event of a crash, while Bombardier Burbridge meticulously confirmed that the bomb bay and high explosives dentro were still properly secured, adhering strictly to safety protocols even in moments of extreme stress. Unbeknownst to the crew of the All-American 3, their extraordinary survival in surviving such catastrophic damage as losing half of their tail was already starting to generate ripples of surprise stemming from the North African German fighter community. The pilots who witnessed the enormous collision in the skies above had quickly documented their observations and submitted detailed reports. The intelligence officers received these reports with a mixture of skepticism and wonder, struggling to explain what had transpired in the chaotic moments of the aerial encounter. The Luftwaffe, with vast experience engaging with the B-17 Flying Fortress, believed until this incident that they understood the aircraft's resilience. Since the advent of American heavy bombing campaigns arriving in Europe, they had been fighting these formidable bombers and studying their strengths and weaknesses. Through extensive technical analysis, it was established that normally a B-17 required approximately 20 hits from 20-millimeter rounds to ensure destruction, thanks to its multiple redundant systems, self-sealing fuel tanks, and heavy armor. Such features made the B-17 frustratingly difficult for enemy fighters to bring down decisively. Yet what they faced now defied all logical expectations. Here was a B-17 flying with half its tail torn away, yet still aloft and apparently capable of flying stably. This level of resilience was beyond the scope of their prior calculations and understanding. Initial reports of this miraculous survival were met with strong doubts. Many officers and pilots believed that perhaps the complaints and visual accounts were mistakes, misunderstandings, or perhaps that the bomber had crashed later, out of view or behind clouds, and that what was observed was a flight after destruction rather than one. Having once been a successful fighter ace and a prominent figure deeply involved in shaping Luftwaffe fighter tactics, he later took it upon himself to document the psychological toll inflicted by the resilience of American bomber aircraft. According to his accounts, witnessing a flying fortress endure numerous battle wounds, injuries that would have proved catastrophic for any other aircraft, was nothing short of heartbreaking and deeply destabilizing, especially for the young and inexperienced pilots who had been trained to destroy such targets. The sight of these formidable bombers, damaged yet still aloft despite grievous injuries, crushed any remaining morale among the German pilots, reminding them vividly of the seemingly invincible toughness of their adversaries. In combat, a typical scenario would often involve these relentless American crews expending their valuable ammunition, aiming carefully at what should have been easy kills, only to watch helplessly as the enemy aircraft, battered but unbroken, jettisoned bombs and managed to fly home, seemingly unharmed at times. The frustration and discouragement this engendered in the German fighters could be profound, a stark reminder that enemy resilience defied their best efforts and shattered previous expectations of kill certainty. On this specific occasion, clear communications were established between the bomber, dubbed All-American, and Biskra Tower, as the aircraft approached the airfield for an emergency landing. The pilot reported being 5 minutes from the runway, requesting permission for a straightforward, or straight-in, approach onto runway 27. Biskra Tower responded with official clearance, emphasizing that the bomber was allowed an immediate approach and that emergency vehicles were standing ready in case there were casualties. They inquired about the number of wounded on board, a standard protocol for such critical landings. The Azorian officers, Bragg and Engel, exchanged looks of quiet anticipation and concern behind their helmets. Despite what seemed impossible and defying all natural odds in physics, all 10 crew members aboard appeared entirely unscathed, a startling fact considering the force of the collision that had inflicted what should have been fatal damage. Remarkably, not one of the crew was injured during the impact, although it was obvious that their aircraft had sustained structural harm. Bragg's voice over the radio confirmed what everyone was thinking. There were no wounded, just a need for a clean approach. The crew referenced the damage, simply stating that they had structural issues but no injuries. It was an incredible understatement, considering the gravity of what had happened. As the aircraft's approach progressed, the brown expanse of Biskra's desert-dusted airfield grew clearer through the cockpit windscreen, emerging like a gleaming haven from the hazy desert horizon, a symbol of safety, solidity, and final relief after the harrowing ordeal. The crew prepared to land by lowering the landing gear. Engel moved the control lever with steady determination, knowing that the aircraft's gear was operated by a separate hydraulic system. A reassuring series of thuds confirmed that the wheels had locked into position securely. A vital step before permissible touchdown. The cockpit indicators displayed 3 green lights, signaling that the landing gear was fully down and firmly secured in place. Next came the decision about flaps, crucial for reducing speed and stabilizing the aircraft's descent. Engel asked Bragg if they should deploy them. Bragg silently assessed the situation, understanding flaps would slow their approach, but also alter airflow across the aircraft's tail, already compromised by damage sustained during the crash. Opting for safety and control, he decided against deploying flaps, knowing that at their current high speed, they would need to make a precise, high-speed landing straight onto the runway. Bragg's experience from every flight he'd ever flown dictated that this approach required every skill he possessed. The huge aircraft didn't want to align perfectly. Instead, it fought against maneuvering inputs, yawing, rolling, and pitching unpredictably, fighting his attempts to keep it on course. Every correction was met with an opposite response from the aircraft's disturbed aerodynamics, an exhausting and mental struggle to keep the bomber's flight path true amid the chaos during the last crucial mile of the approach. As they neared the runway, just half a mile away, the runway presented itself like a promise of salvation. Its width seemed more reassuring to the crew than any they had experienced before, a wide ramp of salvation after their perilous journey. Ground crews lined the taxiways, observing in stunned silence the approaching aircraft, an enormous, battered aircraft that defied conventional expectations in physics alike. Some witnesses later claimed to see daylight through the fuselage from almost a quarter-mile away, evidence of the severe damage sustained, yet the aircraft still holding together enough to complete its flight. At a speed of approximately 110 miles per hour, faster than a typical landing, the main wheels touched down softly on the sand-swept runway, the wheels kissing the ground with surprising delicacy given their velocity. Bragg gently executed the landing, and the aircraft settled onto the runway, initially appearing as though it might be a textbook. Flawless landing, an incredible feat after such damage. However, in the uncertain chaos that followed the crash landing, it was evident that any sudden movement made by the aircrafts ahead could have sparked a catastrophic ground loop. Such an event would have resulted in a violent, uncontrollable spinning of the aircraft around its vertical axis, likely tearing the entire structure apart with immense force. As the aircraft finally grindingly came to a complete stop, it was situated in a perplexing and awkward position, its tail section awkwardly draped and resting on the runway, while its nose pointed skyward, as if reaching for the heavens in silent defiance of the destruction. For a brief, tense silence, no one in the vicinity dared to move. Then, almost as if prompted by a predetermined signal, all 10 members of the aircraft's crew, in unison, quickly scrambled from their positions and made their way swiftly towards the exits. They gathered on the runway in a huddle of disbelief, staring back at the battered aircraft with eyes wide with shock and relief. The extent of the damage was even more staggering than anyone had anticipated. The tail section, which should have been a solid and integral part of the fuselage, hung at an incredibly unnatural angle, almost impossible in its position, connected by mere strips of aluminum, thin enough to resemble heavy paper rather than structural metal. It was utterly beyond comprehension how this itty-bitty framework had managed to hold together throughout 90 minutes of intense flight, braving the forces of gravity, turbulence, and combat. Bragg, the crew chief, turned to the flight surgeon, who had arrived hurriedly with his medical team. His voice was calm but insistent. "No injuries, Doc," he assured them. The surgeon, scanning the scene from the crew to the aircraft, seemed to be witnessing something either miraculous or delirious. A shrug of disbelief etched across his face as if the entire event defied all logic. "We're all fine," Bragg reiterated emphatically. "Not a scratch." The doctor's expression was one of bewilderment as he looked back and forth between the battered aircraft and the crew, as if trying to determine whether he was witnessing a miracle or a strange hallucination taking shape before his very eyes. What transpired next would become part of the storied legend, recounted and retold in military halls and briefing rooms throughout the entire theater of operations. A crew of 3 ground personnel from a neighboring squadron, driven by curiosity about the alarming damage, decided to take a closer look. They climbed aboard the mysterious aircraft, dubbed All-American 3, maneuvering carefully into the interior to get a better view of the extensive destruction. Peering through the gash that marred the fuselage, the 3 men marveled at the chaos, an almost surreal scene of mangled metal, torn panels, and twisted framing. Their combined weight, roughly 500 pounds, was the final straw that caused an unsettling, grinding sound as the overstressed metal finally could take no more. Without warning, the severely compromised tail section snapped entirely from its base and collapsed onto the runway with a jarring, ear-splitting clang. The 3 airmen leapt away rapidly, their faces drained of color and their bodies trembling, suddenly grasping the horrifying realization of just how perilously close the crew had come to death during those harrowing 90 minutes of tension and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Master Sergeant Hank Highland, the crew chief designated to oversee the fate of All-American 3, moved in methodical slow motion around the wreckage, jotting notes on a clipboard. His task was crucial. He needed to determine definitively whether the aircraft could be salvaged or if it must be declared a total write-off. It was supposed to be an academic question, almost a formality, considering the visible devastation. No aircraft, in all likelihood, could sustain such extensive damage and still be capable of flight again. Yet the situation was complicated by the realities of wartime production in 1943. America was producing B-17 flying fortresses at a speed that astounded both allies and enemies alike. In facilities sprawling across the cities of Seattle, Burbank, and Long Beach, workers mounted an almost relentless assembly line, turning out a new flying fortress every few hours. These production lines operated relentlessly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, staffed predominantly by men who were considered either too old or too young for combat duty, as well as by women, many of whom were experiencing their first factory work ever, having been thrust into the industrial war effort following the attack on Pearl Harbor. Sergeant Highland's gaze was fixed on the serial number painted prominently on the aircraft's tail, 41-2446. Strangely, this aircraft had already endured far more punishment than most machines should ever be expected to survive. Perhaps in some small way, it had one more miracle left in it, another chance to defy expectations. Conventional wisdom dictated otherwise. The extent of the damage meant that All-American 3 was irreparably crippled. The men of the United States Army's 53rd Air Service Squadron devoted a grueling 6 weeks to performing what could only be described as major, almost surgical, repairs on one of their aircraft. Their task was to salvage and reassemble a vital part of a damaged bomber, specifically a tail section from a different B-17 that had sustained catastrophic damage in an accident during a landing. This was no ordinary task, and their work environment was far from the polished bays of a commercial or factory maintenance facility. Instead, it resembled something you might find in the hull of a shipyard, with the crew forging and fitting each piece with painstaking precision. Every step of their work required meticulous attention. Every rivet had to be perfectly placed to ensure the structural integrity of this complex assembly. The control cables, each one a critical component for flight control, had to be tensioned with unparalleled care to guarantee proper responsiveness. Electrical connections, which formed the electronic nervous system of the aircraft, needed thorough testing and retesting to prevent failures mid-flight. The team endured external conditions that were as relentless as their task. The desert heat that soared to a scorching 120 degrees Fahrenheit during the blazing daytime, followed by freezing nights when temperatures plunged precipitously, sometimes close to freezing point. Despite the exhaustion, despite the punishing elements of desert life, these brave mechanics worked under the conviction that every aircraft they repaired meant a victory for their side. Each restored bomber could contribute to the war effort by delivering essential payloads to enemy targets, and each one brought the hope of hastening the conclusion of the global conflict. Their work, though crude by Boeing standards and the masterful craftsmanship of factory-built aircraft, was born of necessity and resolve. The bomber they revived was forever changed, perhaps slower, perhaps less agile and more prone to vibrations, which had not existed prior to the repairs, but her spirit endured. On the 10th of May in the year 1943, the aircraft known as All-American 3 once again took to the skies. Despite her battered appearance and the modifications she bore, she carried a crew from the United States on an important mission towards Sicily. The ground crews who had spent countless hours bringing her back from the dead watched anxiously as she climbed aloft. There was pride in their efforts. They had fought against the odds to give her another chance, but also a level of apprehension about whether her reconstructed frame would truly hold her through the perilous flight ahead. Fortunately, she did. All-American 3 proved capable of flying missions once more, although her life was now less demanding and more routine. Instead of combat, she was relegated to less intense roles: transport runs, training flights, and logistical milk runs to areas where enemy fighters were unlikely to be encountered. She had earned her respite from combat. Her resilience ensured she remained part of the fleet, performing useful but less hazardous duties. By the 6th of March 1945, at the airfield in Lucira, Italy, her service was finally concluded. The aircraft entered retirement, her flying days over at last, and she was salvaged to serve as a reminder of the countless missions she had completed amid the chaos of war. The search into the background of the German pilot responsible for the collision that brought down All-American 3 reveals a young man whose life was tragically entwined with history's most violent conflict. Feldwebel Eric Paxia was merely 24 years old on the 1st of February, 1943, just a year younger than Kendrick Bragg, the American pilot. Born on the 7th of May, 1918, Paxia grew up in a Germany that had been radically transformed by the rise of National Socialism and the impending chaos of war. From an early age, Paxia was involved in glider clubs, secretive organizations that secretly prepared talented young pilots for the Luftwaffe, a formidable air force that was officially banned under the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles, but operated clandestinely across Germany. By early 1943, Paxia had proven himself to be an exceptional fighter pilot, with a tally of 16 confirmed aerial victories. While respectable and effective, he was not among the ranks of the legendary ace pilots who became symbols of Nazi propaganda. Instead, he was one of the skilled professionals, performing his duties with steady competence and unwavering dedication. He flew with the 6th Staffel of the Jagdgeschwader 53, 60/Y Gruppe 53 Picas, one of the most successful fighter wings in the Luftwaffe. Over the course of the war, units like these had been responsible for destroying well over 4,000 Allied aircraft, making their pilots some of the most feared adversaries in the skies. On that fateful day, Paxia manned a Bf-109G4, which represented the latest evolution of Willy Messerschmitt's revolutionary fighter design. This aircraft was powered by the formidable Daimler-Benz DB605 engine, generating approximately 1,475 horsepower. Its armament included a 20mm cannon, firing directly through in the unforgiving theater of war. Even the slightest lapse in vigilance can spell catastrophe. A single moment of inattention or a stray bullet striking an unintended spot can turn years of combat experience into meaningless chatter amid chaos. Such was the brutal reality faced by those soaring through the skies. An enemy fire that did not discriminate or pause, punishing any error with lethal precision. One such deadly encounter culminated in the swift demise of combat veteran Sergeant Joe James, whose twin 50 caliber machine guns responded instantaneously in a deadly burst that found its unfortunate target. The bullet found its mark in the fighter of Captain Eric Paxia, bringing his valiant journey to an abrupt close in the middle of a fierce aerial engagement. His body was later recovered from the tangled wreckage of his aircraft, and he was laid to rest with honor at the Bourges Cedria German War Cemetery, nestled in Benarous, Tunisia. There, his grave, marked as Plot 3, Row 8, grave number 15, has remained a somber testament to his sacrifice up to the present day. On the first day of March in the year 1943, Paxia's valor was recognized posthumously through the presentation of the Ehrenpal der Luftwaffe, a prestigious honor goblet awarded to those whose bravery and achievements in aerial combat had noticeably distinguished them among their peers. The official citation described only the circumstances of his death, omitting mention of the collision that precipitated the crash, and simply stating that he had fallen in combat against enemy bombers. As was customary, his family received a formal letter from his commanding officer, an expression of regret and appreciation for his service to the Reich. Yet they remained unaware of the astonishing tale of survival and resilience that their son's aircraft embodied, an episode that would later be regarded as one of the most extraordinary stories of airborne endurance in aviation history. The fate of the aircraft, known famously as All-American 3, became a subject of intense study among engineers at Boeing and analysts from the Army Air Force alike. The question that perplexed them most was how a plane, missing critical structural sections, could remain airborne for nearly an hour and a half. Their investigations revealed that the answer lay in the innovative design philosophy upon which the B-17 was fundamentally built. Unlike older bombers that depended heavily on a single main spar running longitudinally through the wing and fuselage to bear the load, the B-17 employed a semi-monocoque construction, a structure where load-bearing capacity was distributed across multiple interconnected components rather than relying on one primary element. This revolutionary approach meant that the strength was derived from the synergy of the entire frame. Aluminum skin sheets, reinforced by a congregation of internal frames and stringers, collectively sharing stresses and forces rather than concentrating them in one area. In practical terms, this meant that even if some primary load paths were compromised, say due to combat damage, secondary and tertiary load paths could pick up the slack under appropriate conditions, maintaining the overall integrity of the aircraft. Crucially, the part of the aircraft that survived intact was the area least likely to break apart, the wing-fuselage junction, regarded as the strongest point on the entire bomber. The main spars, which supported the weight of 4 engines and held extensive fuel tanks, remained undamaged, allowing the aircraft to sustain flight. Moreover, the Bombay region, with its sturdy construction designed to carry and support significant ordnance of up to 8,000 pounds, served as a rigid core that kept the aircraft's forward and aft sections connected, even with critical structural elements damaged or broken. William Allen, a seasoned Boeing engineer who meticulously reviewed incident reports and aircraft damage assessments, emphasized that the B-17's durability was not incidental, but deliberately engineered. In a technical memorandum he authored later, he stated plainly that these aircraft had been built from the outset with combat resilience in mind. "We anticipated that these planes would suffer hits," Allen explained, and accordingly integrated redundancy into their design wherever possible. He pointed out that the aircraft featured multiple layers of control cables, backup hydraulic systems, and structural components capable of taking on loads even when neighboring parts had failed. The survival of All-American 3, and, by extension, many of its kind, was a testament to the meticulous engineering effort to include as much resilient redundancy as the aircraft's total weight could bear. Further contributing to its endurance was the aircraft's electrical system, which played a pivotal role in maintaining control during critical moments. Although many mechanical control cables were severed or compromised due to battle damage, the electrical wiring, particularly that which connected to the autopilot servos, remained partially operational. This residual functionality allowed pilots like Bragg and Engel to exert some measure of control over the aircraft's flight path via the Norden Site autopilot system, even when manual control lines were compromised or rendered useless. In this way, a combination of groundbreaking structural design and innovative electrical redundancy enabled the bomber to defy expectations and survive through the most harrowing circumstances, transforming a seemingly doomed aircraft into an enduring symbol of resilience and advanced engineering in aerial combat. Despite not initially being designed with this role in mind, a particular capability unexpectedly proved to be an invaluable asset when confronting extremists. The aftermath of an incident involving the survival of all members aboard the famed American B-17 aircraft sent shockwaves through both Allied and Axis air forces alike. For the brave American bomber crews, this event transformed into a legendary tale, passed down through countless briefing rooms stretching from the lush landscapes of England to the sun-drenched terrains of Italy. The enduring message was clear: if a heavily damaged American B-17, with at least half of its tail section shot away, could still make it back to base, then their own battered aircraft, no matter how severely compromised, could have a fighting chance to survive as well. The psychological influence of this story on bomber crews was profound and difficult to quantify. It fostered an unshakable confidence among the personnel flying these formidable flying fortresses, convinced that their aircraft could withstand levels of punishment that would undoubtedly destroy other models. Such tales of resilience inspired a deep sense of pride and determination. In recognition of this extraordinary incident, the 414th Bombardment Squadron adopted a new emblem that captured the essence of their experience, a symbolic image depicting a puppy praying atop an aircraft's tail section. This emblem was a visual pun on the phrase, "coming in on a wing and a prayer," a saying that reflected the crew's hope and belief during perilous missions. Although the phrase "coming in on a wing and a prayer" was originally associated with the song of the same title, written about the aircraft named Thunderbird, its connection to the all-American B-17 became an enduring part of squadron lore. For the German Luftwaffe, this tale only heightened existing fears about American industrial and manufacturing prowess. Field Marshal Gerhard Milch, in charge of Luftwaffe aircraft production, had already issued warnings concerning the strategic implications of American bomber fabrication. During a high-level conference, he famously remarked that the Americans were building bombers at such a rapid pace, comparable to how they manufactured cars, that they could be compared to those produced mass-market vehicles. "No," he said with emphasis, "faster than we build cars." He then added that these bombers were not fragile artifacts but flying tanks, underscoring their robustness and capacity to sustain damage. The tactical repercussions of such durable aircraft were considerable. Luftwaffe doctrine had traditionally operated on the assumption that severe structural damage would lead to the immediate destruction of a bomber. During training, German pilots were instructed to target specific critical points, such as the wing roots, cockpit, or bomb bay, aiming to incapacitate the aircraft with precision strikes. A few well-placed cannon shells at these vital spots were believed to be enough to bring down even the sturdiest bomber aircraft. However, incidents like the extraordinary survival of all American B-17 crew members challenged these long-held beliefs. Germans soon realized that even the most precise shots could sometimes fail to pose a lethal threat. Major Ga Raul, who would go on to become the third highest-scoring Allied ace in history with a total of 275 victories, vividly recounted the exasperation experienced when attacking these seemingly indestructible bombers. He described the frustration of firing upon an American B-17, seeing its structure visibly crack and fragments fly off. Yet the aircraft stubbornly continued to fly despite the damage. Sometimes, after expending all his ammunition, he would watch helplessly as the bomber persisted in flight, seemingly protected by supernatural forces beyond the understanding of his fighters. This resilience prompted the Germans to develop new combat tactics. They shifted their focus to attacking from the front, where defensive armor was notably weaker, and concentrated multiple fighters on single bombers in the hope of overwhelming their defenses. They also started designing and deploying heavier weapons explicitly aimed at destroying these resilient aircraft. One such adaptation was the development of the 20mm Mk-108 cannon, which fired explosive shells capable of creating meter-wide breaches in bomber structures. This weapon was a direct response to the B-17's legendary durability, aiming to counter the aircraft's famously tough armor. The 10 crew members who survived the impossible flight of the all-American B-17, officially designated as All-American 3, would carry the memory of their experience for the remainder of their lives. Each crew member processed this traumatic event in their own individual manner, but all shared a deep understanding of the extraordinary resilience that had allowed them to survive beyond all expectations. Their story, thoroughly documented through contemporary records and eyewitness testimonies, remains one of the most detailed and well-corroborated incidents in the history of aviation during World War II. Lieutenant Kendrick Robertson Bragg, Jr. for instance, was among those who survived. After completing his combat tour, Bragg returned to the United States, where he served as an instructor pilot, dedicating himself to teaching new bomber crews the skills necessary for future missions. His first-hand account, along with those of his fellow crew members, continues to serve as a powerful testament to the unleashed in the chaos. Aware that every second counted, he faced the wreckage with a calm that seemed almost detached from the chaos surrounding him. His actions and attitude during that harrowing ordeal became the stuff of legend among his comrades, serving as a testament to the resilience and grit of those who flew into danger countless times. Despite the horror of the collision and the damage inflicted upon their aircraft, Sam Searles, affectionately known as Lonesome Sam, exemplified a core trait of the bravest among the military aviators: an unwavering calmness under pressure, combined with a readiness to confront the chaos head-on. Throughout his life, Sam bore the weight of his remarkable story, which had become emblematic of courage and perseverance in the face of unimaginable peril. His concern for Bragg's jacket, an act of simple kindness amid the destruction, highlighted his compassionate character, something that struck everyone who knew him. When pressed about his decision to crawl through the torn fuselage, his only response was modest. "What else was I supposed to do?" His words conveyed a straightforward acceptance of his role in that critical moment, reflecting a deep-seated sense of duty that seems almost innate among true heroes. This fearless act amidst devastation ultimately reinforced the indomitable spirit that defines the best of American airmen. The resounding bravery of Searles and his fellow crew members often overshadowed the complex realities and moral ambiguities of their wartime experiences. For instance, Technical Sergeant Jacques, whose machine guns had inadvertently contributed to the tragic collision, grappled with feelings of guilt and remorse. He had managed to save his crew by shooting down an attacking enemy fighter, yet that very action triggered a catastrophic collision that nearly claimed all their lives. His words, "The paradox haunted me," reveal the inner turmoil faced by many service members caught in the impossible circumstances of war. When asked about that pivotal moment, Jacques responded simply, "I did my job," a phrase that encapsulates the ambiguous nature of duty in wartime, where sometimes doing what was necessary had profound unintended consequences. Meanwhile, the ship's waist gunners, Michael Zuck and Elton Condor, reflected on the extraordinary bravery they witnessed during that ordeal. They recounted that the most inspiring act they had seen wasn't even its ferocity, but its quiet determination. Sam Searles crawling through the wreckage with unwavering calm amidst the chaos. According to Zuck, in a candid interview 50 years later, "We saw a lot of brave men doing brave things, but Sam crawling through that mess, cool as could be, that was something truly special." Such moments, though often fleeting, serve as powerful reminders of the extraordinary resolve exhibited by ordinary men, thrown into extraordinary circumstances. The legend of Lonesome Sam was further cemented by his actions and personality, which epitomized the resilience of the American air crews during the war. His composed demeanor and concern for a colleague's jacket amid the ruins became emblematic of the unflappable determination that defined the best of those who fought in the skies. His straightforward attitude encapsulated in his statement that, "What else was I supposed to do?" And when asked about his crawl through the damaged fuselage, underscored his pragmatic approach to a life-threatening situation. Beyond the heroism he displayed physically, his humility and sense of camaraderie left an indelible mark on everyone who heard his story, highlighting the qualities that made the best of American servicemen stand out in moments of crisis. Above all, the collective memories and accounts of these crew members have survived as a testament to their extraordinary bravery, resilience, and sense of duty. Their stories have echoed down through the decades, preserved in letters, interviews, and memoirs, each adding layers of nuance to the historical narrative of that perilous day over Tunisia. Their recountings continue to inspire future generations, serving as enduring exemplars of courage in the face of chaos and danger, reminding us all that, even in the darkness of war, the unyielding human spirit can triumph against all odds. Waited to drop out of the sky, risking everything in a perilous descent that could have ended in disaster. An approach like this seemed almost reckless, yet within that reckless humility lay a profound truth. It is far better to risk death by trying than to linger in the shadows of indecision and hesitation, waiting passively for inevitable doom. Radio operator Paul Galloway recalled that during their return flight, maintaining coherent and steady communication with the base was among the most taxing challenges he had ever faced in his military service. Each time the aircraft encountered turbulence or lurched unexpectedly, his mind was flooded with a frightening thought that the plane might be coming apart in midair. Nevertheless, he persisted in transmitting their current position, speaking with unwavering calmness despite the chaos around him, because he understood the importance of clear communication. If their aircraft went down, he wanted the ground crews to have a precise location to launch a rescue. It was this indomitable spirit, this relentless need to provide vital information amid extreme adversity, that inspired the captured photographs beneath the hellish skies of North Africa. James Charles Cliff Cutforth, a lieutenant and a talented photographer, managed to photograph what would arguably become one of the most scrutinized images of World War II. From his vantage point on the aircraft named Flying Flitgun, the picture provides a haunting profile view of American aircraft amidst the vast, sun-baked desert, a snapshot frozen in time, cataloged under the designation of U.S. Air Force Photo 050524, an image that would spark years of debate and analysis among engineers, military strategists, and historians alike. The image starkly reveals the severity of the damage inflicted upon the aircraft's tail section. The destruction is visible in clear, unforgiving detail. The left horizontal stabilizer is entirely missing, leaving a gaping void in what once had been a crucial element of the plane's stability, while the vertical stabilizer bears a massive diagonal gash slicing through its surface, evidence of a brutal impact. The fuselage itself is torn open from the tail gunner's position forward, exposing the battered interior beneath the exterior armor. Yet astonishingly, the aircraft is flying steadily, maintaining a level trajectory with all four engines still functional. There is no sign of the catastrophic structural failure physics would normally dictate should occur after such extensive damage. No breakage, no uncontrollable wobble, no signs of loss of control. This visual anomaly has kept experts busy for decades. Over the years, the photograph has been misinterpreted and assigned various false attributions, often manipulated to serve different narratives. Some illustrations depict the aircraft over the English Channel, supposedly under escort by P-51 Mustangs, while other captions claim it was captured from a German fighter aircraft, with modifications sometimes made to enhance the perceived drama by exaggerating the damage. Despite these distortions, the authentic photograph conveys a truth that requires no embellishments. A lone aircraft, battered beyond physical explanation, defying the very laws of physics by continuing to fly, a testament not only to the resilience of its design, but also to the extraordinary skills and sheer grit of the crew aboard. This scene captures a moment that seemingly defies the realm of the possible, where an aircraft stripped of vital structural parts and bearing the scars of violent impact remains airborne. It stands as undeniable proof of what a handful of involved men could accomplish through a potent combination of skill, courageous determination, and an overwhelming streak of what many experienced as divine intervention. The incident unfolded on the first day of February in the year of 1943, at a critical turning point in the North African campaign. The relentless Afrika Korps, once believed to be nearly unstoppable under the command of Erwin Rommel, was now increasingly squeezed between two formidable forces: Montgomery's Eighth Army pressing inward from the east and advancing American units closing in from the west. The airfields of Tunis and Bizerte, unassuming at first glance, held unthinkable strategic importance. They served as vital lifelines for the Axis powers' supply and reinforcement routes. Every successful bombing mission aimed at these ports expedited the eventual collapse of Axis resistance in the region. Remarkably, within fewer than 3 months following the miraculous return of the damaged aircraft, the tide turned decisively against the Axis forces. On the 13th of May in the year 1943, nearly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrendered in Tunisia, an overwhelming defeat that resonated as profoundly as the Battle of Stalingrad had done on the Eastern Front. That surrender marked the beginning of the end for Axis ambitions in North Africa, signifying the collapse of their once seemingly invincible hold on the region. The B-17 Flying Fortress, with all its bombastic reputation and hardened resilience, played a commanding role within this victorious chapter. The bomber, alongside the repaired aircraft known as All-American 3, became an indelible symbol of American air power and ingenuity during the war. While the B-24 Liberator was produced in larger quantities and could carry heavier bomb, the B-17 that undoubtedly captured the imagination of the public during its era became more than just a formidable weapon of war. It became a symbol of resilience and relentless defense. This aircraft earned a legendary reputation for its extraordinary ability to withstand punishing damage while still bringing its crews safely back to base. Such resilience was rare and remarkable for wartime aviation, setting the B-17 apart from other aircraft in its class. Throughout the entirety of World War II, B-17s played a crucial role in strategic bombing campaigns across Europe, and statistics revealed just how impactful they were. In total, these aircraft were responsible for dropping over 640,360 tons of bombs on a wide array of military targets and infrastructure across the continent. No other American aircraft achieved such a record in terms of sheer bomb load delivered. However, such impressive operational achievements came at an inevitably high human cost, marked by staggering losses. Out of the 12,731 B-17s that had rolled off production lines to support the Allied war effort, nearly 4,735 were lost during combat. Every one of these losses represented the tragic absence of 10 young men, pilots, bombardiers, engineers, and other crew members who would never return home to their families. This high attrition rate underscored the peril faced by bomber crews, making survival statistics a grim but important aspect of wartime aviation. The survival rate for these men was, regrettably, among the lowest within the entire military, emphasizing the inherent dangers faced by those who participated in these dangerous missions. Completing a target tour of 25 bombing missions, which was later extended to 35, was widely regarded as an extraordinary feat, an indication that a crew had beaten the daunting expectations and many hazards of combat. Such milestones were regarded as little miracles, testaments to the valor and skill of the crews in their aircraft. The story of the All-American 3, a notably resilient B-17, stood in stark contrast to the ruthless, mathematical reality of strategic bombing, an enterprise where losses and risks were relentless. Studying this particular incident has provided aviation engineers with invaluable insights into how the aircraft managed to endure situations that would seem impossible under normal circumstances. Analyses of the All-American 3's survival suggest that the aircraft was operating perilously close to the edges of what could be controlled in flight. The damage sustained during enemy fire caused a dramatic shift of the aircraft's center of gravity toward the tail, a shift severe enough to challenge even modern flight control systems. After losing critical structural components in the fuselage and tail, the aircraft entered a fragile state, yet it was able to remain controllable due to its inherent design features. This phenomenon was largely attributed to the aircraft's structural redundancy, a fundamental aspect of the B-17's engineering, which consisted of multiple load paths capable of distributing forces across various structural components. Specifically, the B-17's design incorporated various load-bearing routes for vital forces. When the primary structural supports failed under stress, secondary systems, intended as backup, but not designed to bear full operational loads, were able to take over just enough to preserve the aircraft's basic integrity and allow the crew a fighting chance to survive and control the aircraft. A pivotal strategy in this survival story involved reducing airspeed immediately upon encountering severe damage. This step significantly decreased the aerodynamic forces acting upon the compromised structure. Every incremental reduction in the aircraft's speed reduced the stress on its weakened parts exponentially, making it easier to manage the aircraft under emergency conditions. Engineering analyses reveal that gentle, deliberate, and carefully coordinated control inputs were critical in maintaining stability without overexerting the already stressed and fragile airframe. Had the crew executed aggressive control movements, the remaining structural elements may have been pushed beyond their limits, leading to catastrophic failure. Thus, the tactical application of smooth, calculated adjustments, originally mastered by pilots like Bragg and Ingalls, kept the forces within survivable limits, a testament to the importance of skillful flying in dire circumstances. Furthermore, the crew's strategic redistribution of weight played an unexpectedly positive role in the aircraft's survival. By moving forward from the heavily damaged tail section, either through crew movements or adjustments, they partially corrected the dangerous aft shift of the center of gravity. This shift effectively reduced some of the stress exerted on the tail and stabilizing surfaces, providing critical additional resilience to the aircraft's structural system in its perilous state. Environmental circumstances also played a key role. During this incident, the crew was flying over the relatively calm and steady air of the North African desert, which meant there was no severe turbulence or storm activity to further stress the already compromised structure. Were they to have encountered thunderstorm turbulence or violent weather phenomena, the aircraft would very likely have succumbed to the forces acting on it. The calm skies, in this case, proved to be a vital factor in the aircraft's prolonged endurance. This incident continues to serve as a case study for aerospace engineers and military pilots alike, illustrating how robust design principles, combined with highly skilled piloting, can yield. During the early days of military aviation, it was commonly believed that American bombers represented an easy target in the skies, large, slow-moving, and highly vulnerable to enemy fighters. This misconception led to a strategy focused on exploiting these perceived weaknesses, with enemy forces aiming to attack these aircraft as if they were fragile and defenseless. Typically, they would attempt to wave off the threat with aggressive assaults, aiming to inflict crippling damage in a single strike. Yet despite such relentless attacks, American bombers often continued to fly, absorbing tremendous punishment while maintaining their operational integrity, sometimes for beyond what anyone had anticipated. The profound realization of how resilient these bombers truly were was largely attributed to a pioneering strategist named Egan Meir. Known for his dogged persistence, Meir developed a right-angle attack strategy that aimed to engage enemy bombers head-on, an approach that eventually became standard doctrine within the Luftwaffe when confronting formations of these aircraft. Reflecting on his observations, Meir wrote that the American bombers defied expectations. Initially, the Germans imagined they would find bombers akin to their own, delicate, fragile craft that would crumble under attack, requiring constant fighter support and vulnerable to concerted assaults. Instead, what they encountered were comparable to flying fortresses, actual castles enduring in the air, able to withstand severe damage that would destroy lesser aircraft. Such resilience prompted the German Air Force to meticulously document the B-7 bomber's survivability, analyzing every aspect to discover delicate weak points and the most advantageous angles of attack. Their ongoing investigations revealed an unsettling truth. Even when the bomber sustained what seemed like catastrophic hits, the likelihood of it returning home afterward was surprisingly high. This unexpected durability compelled the Luftwaffe to pursue increasingly formidable measures to combat these aircraft. They equipped their fighters with heavier armament, culminating in the deployment of specialized rockets and large-caliber 30mm cannons, firepower specifically designed with the purpose of bringing down these durable bombers. Meanwhile, back in the United States, at the Boeing manufacturing plant in Seattle, the story of American III's incredible survival was met with a quiet sense of satisfaction and pride among the engineers and workers. These individuals, many of whom had dedicated their skills to designing and building aircraft like her, felt a deep, almost intangible connection to the crews who piloted these machines. While they had never met the 10 brave men aboard, every rivet driven into the airframe, every wire laid, and every system tested contributed to ensuring that at least some of their efforts would bring those men safely back home. The aircraft, designated 41-24406, symbolized the collective determination and craftsmanship of countless individuals. The origins of the B-7 bomber's design trace back to 1934, when the United States Army Air Corps issued a formal requirement for a versatile multi-engine bomber capable of performing a variety of missions. Boeing responded with a revolutionary concept, leading to the creation of its Model 299, known to history as the B-17 Flying Fortress. The prototype took to the skies for its maiden flight on July the 28th of 1935. From the outset, the core design philosophy centered on prioritizing survivability. This principle manifested through multi-engine configurations, insisting that even if one or two engines failed, the aircraft could still reach its destination. It also incorporated redundant control systems, self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent fires, armor plating safeguarding vital components and crew compartments, and reinforced frames around the most vulnerable parts of the aircraft. These innovations reflected a bold effort to make the bomber not just effective, but remarkably resilient in the face of enemy fire. Incredibly, the incident involving All-American 3 exceeded even Boeing's most optimistic expectations. Despite suffering severe damage, a collision that could have been catastrophic, the aircraft managed to keep flying. The crew's resilience and the aircraft's sturdy design allowed them to complete their mission. Their survival became a powerful testament to the aircraft's durability. Boeing recognized the significance of this near-miraculous event and incorporated it into training materials, emphasizing the importance of redundancy, over-engineering, and building aircraft stronger than they appear to need. Grounds for an unofficial motto: build it stronger than it needs to be, because someday someone's life will depend on that extra strength. The staggering scope of the production of the B-7 series during that golden era of wartime engineering is difficult to overstate, even by today's standards. At the height of their manufacturing efforts, Boeing, Douglas, and Lockheed Vega collectively produced approximately 16 aircraft per day. Their workforce comprised thousands of skilled hands, including a significant number of women, so-called Rosie the Riveters, many of whom had no prior experience in aircraft manufacturing before the outbreak of war. These industrious workers, employing what were then advanced methods, achieved quality standards, precision, and reliability that continue to challenge modern manufacturing, especially given the limitations of wartime machinery and materials. Over the decades, stories surrounding the aircraft known as All-American 3 have accumulated layers of mythic storytelling and nostalgia. Many of these tales in the annals of aviation history, certain events are so remarkable that they stand as testaments to human ingenuity, resilience, and the extraordinary ability to defy seemingly insurmountable odds. One such story, painstakingly verified through myriad contemporary documents, first-hand crew testimonies, and photographic evidence, requires no embellishment to capture its truthfulness and significance. It recounts how a small group of 10 brave men piloting a severely damaged aircraft managed to fly approximately 90 minutes and cover 150 miles to safety, a feat that, on the face of it, defied all logic and physics. These men accomplished this extraordinary escape through a combination of exceptional skill, sheer perseverance, and seamless teamwork, working together flawlessly despite the dire circumstances. Their aircraft was in such a state of disrepair that under normal conditions it should not have been able to sustain flight. Yet somehow it defied gravity and remained airborne long enough to carry its crew to safety, an incredible anomaly in flight that remembered instead to stay aloft, rather than succumb to gravity's inevitable pull. Ralph Burbridge, the bombardier, who later dedicated considerable effort to preserving and clarifying the true record of that day, recognized how extraordinary their achievement was. In his final interview, he emphasized that the story in question was already astonishing enough, and that nothing needed to be exaggerated. What happened that day was impossible, he stated firmly, but we did it anyway. And therein lies the core of the narrative, that an event so seemingly improbable unfolded right before their eyes, defying all expectations and conventional understanding of aeronautical limits. It is a tale deserving of being told plainly and truthfully, because its power lies in its genuine occurrence, not in overinflated storytelling. During the course of World War II, the 414th Bombardment Squadron would complete a total of 178 combat missions, suffering significant losses along the way. They lost 85 aircraft and hundreds of their aircrew members, an often tragic and harrowing record of sacrifice. Yet among all their harrowing accounts, none matched the sheer impossibility of the February 1st, 1943 incident involving what became known as All-American 3, a story so extraordinary that it carved itself into the squadron's identity. It became a symbol, an emblem of what the unit was capable of achieving under the most adverse conditions, enough to be revered as a defining touchstone for their collective bravery and ingenuity. This legendary event inspired the design of a new squadron emblem that depicted a playful puppy standing atop a tail section of a fighter aircraft. The choice of a puppy, rather than a traditional military or fearsome symbol, was deliberate and meaningful. It reflected the youthful age of the airmen involved, most of whom were in their early 20s, as well as their vulnerability when faced with enemy fighters and flak artillery, hazards that loomed constantly over their missions. Simultaneously, the image of the puppy in a praying posture conveyed a message of hope, an optimistic symbol, and subtly suggested divine intervention, a belief held strongly among many crew members that they had been saved by a higher power that day. Veterans of the 414th, decades after the war had ended, would still gather in reunions, recounting stories of heroism, sacrifice, and survival. Yet, inevitably, the tale of February the 1st, 1943, would be retold, an event that had become part of their lore, stories of that improbable bomber which refused to succumb even when it looked certain that it should, standing as a testament to their resilience. Those who had flown their own perilous missions, each with their own harrowing encounters, dangerous flights, and moments of near tragedy, listened with profound respect to the story of All American 3, understanding instinctively that it epitomized the enduring spirit of their squadron. The encounter between that fighter plane, German Luftwaffe aircraft, and the American bomber was more than just a single event. It was part of a larger learning curve, a complex process that would drive significant tactical and technical evolution throughout the year of 1943. At the beginning of the war, the German Luftwaffe was equipped primarily with fighters optimized for close-range dogfighting, nimble aircraft armed with rifles or machine guns, effective against other fighters but ill-suited for attacking heavily armed bombers. These fighters, like the early models of the Bf-109, were light and maneuverable, but lacked the firepower needed to take down the larger strategic targets reliably. However, the shifting dynamics forced a re-evaluation of their tactics and equipment. As the Allies began deploying more advanced bombers, the Germans recognized the necessity of upgunning their fighters to combat this new threat effectively. By mid-1943, partly as a direct response to incidents such as the infamous attack involving All American 3, the Luftwaffe began equipping their fighters with heavier, more destructive armaments. The Bf-109 G6, introduced shortly after the incident at Tunisia, be defended successfully against enemy fighters, was still under scrutiny, and each victory or loss carried significant weight. The bravery and resilience demonstrated by those young men in the cockpit underscored the importance of crew cohesion, training, and determination in overcoming seemingly insurmountable challenges. Their ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure not only contributed to the success of their missions, but also exemplified the broader industrial and technological efforts that underpinned the American wartime machine. The story of the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, often called the All-American because of its widespread production and deployment, is as much about the collective effort of an entire nation as it is about the technical prowess of a single aircraft. The approximately 25,000 aircraft generated by American factories by the end of the war testify to an unparalleled level of industrial mobilization. When considering the scale, it becomes even more astonishing to note that in the year 1939, the United States Army Air Corps operated a total of just about 1,700 aircraft. Yet by the year 1945, American manufacturing facilities had produced nearly 300,000 military airplanes, a staggering increase reflecting the country's swift response and formidable industrial capacity. Within this formidable industrial effort, the Boeing B-17 program alone employed more than 40,000 workers at the Boeing plant in Seattle. These workers operated around the clock, divided into 3 shifts, working tirelessly to fulfill the relentless demand for aircraft. Such mass production was not merely a feat of labor, but also a showcase of meticulous organization, advanced engineering, and a distributed manufacturing infrastructure. Components such as the precision-machined R-1820 Cyclone engines were produced in factories located in the states of New Jersey and Ohio. The powerful 25mm caliber machine guns were crafted in manufacturing facilities situated in Connecticut and Michigan. The aluminum alloy skins that coated these aircraft were rolled in plants in Tennessee and Washington, while the intricate instruments and navigational devices were assembled across dozens of specialized American facilities. This widespread, decentralized manufacturing network ensured that no single attack, no sabotage, could cripple the entire production effort. It facilitated the rapid introduction of improvements and modifications to the aircraft, which could be implemented quickly across different factories. When combat experience revealed vulnerabilities or opportunities for enhancement, new design features and repairs could be incorporated into new aircraft within weeks, allowing the U.S. military to adapt swiftly to the evolving demands of the war. Such a high degree of industrial synchronization characterized the breadth and efficiency of American mobilization that is still hard for most to fully grasp. The significance of this industrial capacity extended beyond mere numbers. It was this sprawling, highly coordinated logistics and manufacturing system that enabled the United States to sustain constant pressure through relentless daylight bombing campaigns over occupied Europe and Germany itself. Despite the losses in individual aircraft and crews, the ongoing production and deployment of hundreds of aircraft each month ensured that strategic objectives remained within reach. Amidst these grand industrial achievements were stories of extraordinary human courage. The young men flying those aircraft, such as the crew of the Boeing B-17, dubbed the All-American Three, faced perilous circumstances that appeared almost impossible to survive. Though not professional soldiers by origin, they were citizens who had answered their nation's call to serve during a time of global conflict. Among them was a young man named Bragg, who was a former college athlete. Another was N.E.S., an engineering student eager to fly, and Burbridge, who joined before the attack on Pearl Harbor, simply because of his passionate desire to take to the skies. Their composed professionalism in the face of catastrophic damage reveals the high standards of training and the resilience ingrained in American aircrews. The United States Army Air Forces had established the most extensive aerial training program in history, starting from zero and building upwards. By 1943, this vast network of training bases scattered across the United States produced 100,000 new pilots each year, along with a similarly large number of navigators, bombardiers, gunners, and other essential crew members. This rigorous training process did not solely focus on technical flying skills. It placed strong emphasis on crew coordination, emergency procedures, and mutual trust. Trainees flew together extensively during their advanced training, learning to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses, and cultivating the teamwork that would eventually save their lives in combat. The crew of the All-American Three had been flying together for many months prior to their final mission, which fostered a bond of mutual trust so strong that they could function effectively even when their aircraft was literally disintegrating around them. While losing a single bomber might seem tactically insignificant in a conflict involving thousands of aircraft, the strategic resonance of such incidents was profoundly large. Each victory in difficult circumstances boosted morale, tested new tactics, and reaffirmed the belief that heavier, well-armed bombers could indeed be defended successfully against enemy fighters, a concept central to American daylight bombing doctrine. These stories of resilience and ingenuity, of young men risking their lives in defiance of overwhelming odds, formed the backbone of the collective effort that ultimately turned the tide of the war in Europe. Navigating their way through dangerous enemy skies without the supportive shadow of fighter escort had become increasingly perilous for American bombers, with the toll on aircraft and crew mounting steadily. Yet striking cases such as the All-American Three offered compelling evidence that even when faced with severe damage, the B-17 Flying Fortress exhibited a remarkable capacity to survive the arduous journey back to base. This resilience was more than just a remarkable occurrence. It indicated that these aircraft were capable of withstanding the harsh conditions of combat to such an extent that damaged planes could be repaired and returned to service rather than immediately written off as total losses. This enhanced survivability carried profound implications, especially for the strategic calculations of the German military. If American bombers proved difficult enough to destroy, if they could withstand to some degree the onslaught of enemy fire, and if American industrial efforts could continue to produce these aircraft at a pace that outstripped Germany's ability to shoot them down, Then the odds of attrition warfare in the air increasingly tilted in favor of the Allies. The realization that American bomber production, fueled by a relentless industrial pace, could potentially surpass the rate at which enemy defenses eliminated these aircraft led to a significant shift in German strategic thinking. The Germans began to reconsider their production priorities, gradually redirecting resources from offensive tools, such as bombers, to defensive fighters, aiming to strengthen their armament against the relentless Allied air campaigns. However, this strategic shift, although significant in concept, ultimately proved to be a strategic illusion of sorts. Despite the extensive collection of military records, detailed analyses, and engineering examinations, certain aspects surrounding the survival of the notorious aircraft, designated as All-American 3, continue to fascinate and puzzle engineers and historians alike. Questions remain about how the aircraft's limited remaining structural components, which might have been responsible for carrying only around 20% of the typical load, managed to hold together for overstretched or roughly 90 minutes. The precision of that feat raises further questions about the aircraft's aerodynamics. Why did the destructive vibrations known as flutter, which can cause catastrophic structural failure, not develop during that turbulent return flight despite the plane's battered condition? Remarkably, the aircraft seems to have operated under what engineers call a non-linear aerodynamic regime, a condition where predictable airflow behavior breaks down and standard aerodynamic laws no longer seem reliable. The fact that the B-17 was still controllable under such unpredictable conditions suggests a fortunate convergence of various factors. It's believed that the particular damage patterns sustained during the attack, the atmospheric conditions at the time, and the skillful handling by the crew all played critical roles in creating a rare and precious window of survival, allowing the aircraft to avoid total disintegration against overwhelming odds. Years later, in 1985, some of the surviving crew members convened for a heartfelt reunion in Austin, Texas. Their hair, touched by the passing of decades, had turned silver, and their movements were now slower and more deliberate owing to age. Yet the spirit of remembrance and camaraderie transported them instantaneously back in time, to that perilous day more than 4 decades earlier. Approaching a static display of the historic aircraft, they relived their roles in that remarkable event. Each stepped inside the behemoth, recalling their positions on that fateful day, their minds flooded with memories that refused to fade. Bragg, then at the age of 67, found himself once again in the pilot's seat, the familiar control yoke trembling lightly beneath his hands. Quietly, he whispered, "She was a good ship," acknowledging not just the aircraft's robust design, but also its role in guaranteeing their safe return when all signs seemed to point otherwise. "She brought us home," he reflected softly, "even when she had every right to give up on us. You truly can't ask more than that from an airplane." Meanwhile, Burbridge, standing in the nose's bombardier position, behind that clear plastic plexiglass, remembered vividly the moment he saw the enemy fighter heading straight toward them. "That's where I saw him, the face of the attacker, just before James managed to shoot him down," he recalled, eyes fixed on the distant memories. Such moments, etched into their consciousness, revealed the raw tension and vivid immediacy of the battle, memories that lingered long after the aircraft was no longer present. After sharing their stories, these veterans engaged with aviation enthusiasts who had come specifically to pay homage to those who flew in All-American 3. The men signed autographs, answered countless questions, posed for photographs, and exchanged stories, some humorous, some harrowing. Yet amidst the exchanges, there were also long, contemplative silences, during which each veteran seemed transported back to the moment of impact over Tunisia, reliving that shuddering flight, wondering nervously if each subsequent second might mark the end. Military historians, placing the incident of All-American 3 within the larger theater of the air war over Europe and North Africa, consider this event a striking exemplar of the intensity and resilience. The story of the American B-17 bomber, known as All-American 3, stands as a testament not only to the resilience and ingenuity present in aircraft design, but also to the extraordinary courage exhibited by the young men who risked their lives flying these formidable machines. This aircraft's remarkable survival through what seemed almost impossible circumstances underscores a fundamental truth about aerial combat during World War II. That victory often hinged on a complex interplay of excellent engineering, highly skilled piloting, and an element of sheer luck. This legendary incident also left a profound mark on the future of aviation technology and design philosophy. It prompted an entire reevaluation of how military aircraft were engineered, particularly with regard to resilience and survivability. The concept of redundancy, that is, creating systems within the aircraft that could endure damage without catastrophic failure, became a core principle in the development of subsequent military aircraft. Modern combat planes, whether for the Air Force or Navies, have incorporated these lessons learned from the legendary combat experiences of the B-17, including the use of multiple hydraulic systems to ensure continued control if one fails, redundant flight controls that preserve pilot ability to maneuver despite damage, and structural enhancements designed to prevent total aircraft loss due to localized damage. These innovations were fundamentally inspired by the remarkable record of survival of aircraft like the All-American III, which managed to fly hundreds of miles after severe collision and structural compromise. Delving into the raw data of its feat, the survival story of this particular aircraft remains an extraordinary chapter in aviation history. The bomber managed to stay airborne for at least 90 minutes after collision, covering a distance of approximately 150 miles before finally reaching a landing strip, despite having suffered catastrophic damage in flight. At the moment of impact, it was flying at around 20,000 feet altitude, an impressive feat considering the extent of its internal compromise. Remarkably, all 10 crew members, an integrated crew team responsible for navigation, artillery, and onboard operations, survived unharmed, emerging from the wreckage to continue their lives once the aircraft was repaired. The tail section, a critical structural component, was only reattached and restored to operational condition after 6 weeks of dedicated effort, illustrating the dedication and resilience of those maintaining and restoring these legendary aircraft. One photograph in particular captures the almost impossible, an image so incredible that it has since become a lasting symbol of resilience and determination in aviation history. This image documents the aircraft's battered yet victorious state, an emblematic testament to what apparently defied the odds. Its combat record further amplifies the legend. Before the collision, Eric Patzia's crew, flying aircraft with serial number 41002-146, achieved an impressive tally of 16 aerial victories, showcasing the skill and courage of the crew. The serial numbers of aircraft like All-American III serve as physical identifiers, yet they also tell stories of survival against all odds. These numbers, which should have marked the aircraft as lost according to official loss reports, instead became part of a well-documented history of extraordinary endurance. Today, only a few B-17s remain in airworthy condition, each meticulously preserved and cared for by dedicated organizations that endeavor to keep alive the memory of the legendary flying fortress. Prakiti, when these aircraft are brought out for air shows, they inspire awe among visitors, particularly among the older generation of veterans and aviation enthusiasts who gather in admiration. The distinctive sound of their right-side Cyclone engines signals a link to the past and the brave souls who flew and maintained these mighty planes. At such gatherings, the stories of All-American III are recounted, often told by those who knew someone who flew her, or by experts who have studied her history in painstaking detail. Initially, the younger visitors might approach these tales with a measure of skepticism, believing that such remarkable stories could have been exaggerated over time. They may question whether any aircraft could truly have endured such catastrophic damage and still survive. But as they are shown photographs, images that seem almost unreal, the detailed crew testimonies, and the comprehensive technical reports, it becomes impossible to dismiss the reality. Their skepticism turns into profound amazement. Understanding dawns that the aircraft, once a bustling flying fortress, was ultimately dismantled and scrapped in 1945 after she had given her all in service. What remains today are exhibits in museums, pages in history books, and the memories entrusted to an increasingly small group of surviving World War II veterans. The story of All-American III has transcended mere aircraft status. She has evolved into a potent symbol of American industrial prowess, the courage and sacrifice of aircrew members, and the sometimes inexplicable phenomenon of survival amidst the chaos of war. Her legacy endures, inspiring future generations to appreciate not only the engineering marvels of the past, but also the human spirit that powered those incredible feats. In his final interview, just prior to his passing in 2013, Bombardier Ralph Burbridge was asked what message he would leave about All-American 3, Korea 1. After a lengthy pause, he softly, "Throughout the tumultuous days of World War II, every individual involved in the meticulous craft of aircraft manufacturing, from the dedicated laborers who assembled our planes piece by piece and poured their expertise into their construction, to the resilient ground crews tasked with patching and repairing, all performed their duties with unwavering dedication. Their collective efforts laid the foundational trust that, even amidst chaos and catastrophe, the aircraft would stand resilient. And when catastrophe struck, when every conceivable failure seemed imminent, it was precisely this unity, this unyielding commitment to excellence and perseverance, that afforded a remarkable glimmer of hope and opportunity. This spirit embodies the true essence of the American way, each person doing their part, ensuring that when circumstances are most dire, perseverance and coordination come together to make a difference. Sometimes in the most unexpected moments, it all aligns. Things suddenly fall into place, and what once seemed impossible becomes a tangible reality. Our story takes us back to that extraordinary day, the days when an aircraft, seemingly destined for destruction, defied all odds. The aircraft in question, designated All-American 3, flew home not just as a machine, but as a testament to resilience. It achieved what metrics indicated it could not: an airplane that lacked the ability to fly operationally, a plane that should have been completely incapacitated, managed to land or even just force its way back to safety. And, most astonishing of all, the crew survived. If such an event isn't a miracle, then perhaps no event truly qualifies. The saga of All-American 3 surpasses the boundaries of a mere military incident. It transcends that to become a profound symbol of hope, ingenuity, and extraordinary human willpower. In the broader scope of history, this story signifies a monumental turning point, an instance when the seemingly impossible transitioned into the plausible through a seamless merger of cutting-edge engineering and relentless tenacity. It illustrates how diligent craftsmanship combined with unwavering resolve can produce results that challenge conventional understanding of what military machinery can endure. The 10 brave men who somehow returned from that fateful flight on the 1st of February, 1943, were carried not solely by the formidable engines, 4 Wright Cyclone power plants, and the robust, resilient aluminum of Boeing's engineering, but also, and perhaps more importantly, by a legacy of expertise accumulated within the vast American industrial complex, extensive training within the armed forces, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of divine fate. Many might attribute this feat to serendipity, to some mysterious twist of fate, or even to divine intervention. Regardless of the label, their survival served as undeniable proof that the B-17 Flying Fortress was a formidable aircraft, not merely a propaganda icon, but a genuine machine of remarkable capability. For the German fighters and fighters theater commanders observing the event, it offered a stark reminder of what they were truly up against. It was an unblinking glimpse into the immense might of American industry, the sophistication of its training systems, and the resilience cultivated by unwavering determination. For an opponent already stretched to its limits, struggling to keep pace with the staggering losses and the relentless attrition, the story of All-American 3 became a tragic reminder that the numerical odds were continually unfavorable. That singular photograph, one capturing a B-17 with its tail nearly severed, yet still airborne, has cemented itself as one of the most iconic images of World War II. It is a stark visual testament not just to a miraculous escape, but also to the brutal yet indomitable spirit of American aviation during those darkest days. This image, and the tale it tells, embodies more than a singular act of heroism. It encapsulates the very heart of the American aerial campaign. Damaged yet resilient, battered but unbowed, wounded yet still resolute in the face of insurmountable challenges, These aircraft and their crews exemplified the unbreakable spirit of perseverance and commitment. Their journey was not driven by the desire for fame or individual glory, but by a profound duty to complete their mission and return home. Kendrick Bragg and his crew did not initially set out to craft a story that would resonate through history. They set forth with a straightforward plan, a typical bombing run, a routine mission in a seemingly endless war. Their goal was simple: destroy targets and reach their base. Yet, fate intervened with brutal force, with German fighters striking fiercely and nearly splitting their aircraft in two. Despite the seemingly inevitable doom, these brave souls responded with unwavering professionalism that characterized the best qualities of America's greatest generation. Panic was banished from their ranks. Surrender was unthinkable. Their response was one of steadfast resolve, calm and purposeful. Each crew member instinctively knew their role: the pilot, the gunner, the crew chief, each trusting in their training, in the robustness of their aircraft, and most critically, in one another. In that quiet, composed professionalism lay the seed of a story that would outlast the war and become a legend, one that inspires even today. It became a powerful testament to what can be achieved. In the vast and turbulent skies of a bygone era, there exists a remarkable tale of resilience and unwavering spirit, an account of 10 American airmen whose lives should have been extinguished under impossible circumstances, yet somehow they endured. This narrative is centered around a flight that, by all logic and understanding of aerodynamics, shouldn't have taken place at all. An aircraft that lacked the means to sustain flight, yet defied those very limitations and soared to safety once more. This mighty machine carried far more than just its crew members on board. It bore with it a powerful testament to the strength and resilience of American bomber crews, symbolizing that they were formidable enough to withstand greater perils than most could fathom. Their courage showed that American air crews possessed an extraordinary capacity to confront even the most daunting challenges life's chaos could present. Amid the chaos of war's darkest hours, this story becomes a shining example of how even what seems impossible can, under the right conditions, become achievable. The image that remains etched in history is that of the aircraft's tail section, which, after the aircraft finally landed, came loose and fell away. What is astonishing is that parts of that tail, so fragile they could not bear the weight of just 3 curious ground crew members, managed somehow to stay intact and functional throughout a gravity-defying 90-minute flight. This event is forever etched as one of aviation's greatest bafflements, a stark reminder that human courage and unshakable determination can sometimes push the boundaries of the laws of physics themselves. Today, when experts analyze this extraordinary incident, historians document the facts, engineers scrutinize the data, and veterans recall their memories, the consensus is clear: this feat should have been impossible. Every piece of evidence points to the fact that this aircraft, against all odds, managed to complete its journey home to save the lives of those on board. The photographs taken, the eyewitness testimonies given, and the official military records all substantiate the astonishing truth that this American bomber, in an act of sheer resilience, eluded destruction and returned safely when logically it should have been lost. In the darkest reaches of warfare, where desperation and peril threaten to consume all hope, stories like this serve as powerful reminders. Ordinary individuals, faced with life and death situations, can perform acts of extraordinary heroism that resonate through history. Those 10 young American men, flying in a battered and broken aircraft over hostile territory, refused to accept the concept of defeat. Their unwavering resolve, their refusal to give in to despair, forged a legend, one that has endured beyond the battleground and into the collective memory of generations. Their perseverance against insurmountable odds became a symbol of the indomitable spirit that defined a crucial chapter of the Second World War. The Germans, who observed this incredible feat from the ground, were utterly stunned. They watched as 2 B-17 bombers, one on its last legs and the other gravely damaged, defied expectations by flying in tandem, one piggyback, displaying the resilience and ingenuity of American engineering at its finest. Their awe was further amplified as they witnessed the mastery of American airmen, whose skill and determination turned the impossible into reality at a time when victory often hung by a delicate thread. What these enemy observers saw was more than just military maneuvering. They saw an awe-inspiring testament to human resolve, an embodiment of American ingenuity and tenacity. They bore witness to an astonishing achievement that seemed to stretch the very limits of what humans understand to be possible. It was a stark affirmation that in the crucible of war, even in the face of overwhelming obstacles, the human spirit can rise above, creating legends that remain etched in history for generations to come.